So here we are in the fresh scene, and we will cover some selection tools in this lesson. Well, for that purpose we will also create a simple object, let's say a cube again, and as in previous video we can give it a little bit more details, let's say 5 segments on each side. Okay, we'll convert it by pressing C. Now we are ready for some selections. Actually, what I'm going to do before that is I'm going to position this cube to sit right on the top of this plane. Well, I can do this manually by dragging this, but this is really a bit clumsy. Okay, let me undo that. So this plane, this grid represents actually, grid I may say, represents the 0 height. That means this value on y-axis is exactly 0. So if my object is 200 meters tall, if I enter 100 meters here, so I want this cube to move 100 meters in this direction, then it will exactly sit on that plane. Okay. There is also another way you can do it. For example, we can undo this, and if you drag your mouse and press Shift key while you're doing it, you will be moving in increments. See? Now there is 100 right below my y-axis in opposite direction. You can see a value of 100, and you can also see the value updated here. Let's get back to our selection tools. For them to work, we have to be in a component mode. So let's go, for example, to our edge mode. And the tool we saw and used previously is this live selection tool. So it basically selects everything that is in radius of that tool, which can be set here. A really useful tool. There are some derivation of these tools, of this tool here, that are, for example, a rectangle selection or a lasso selection. So anything that falls inside that radius you define will be selected. Okay? And there is a polygon selection that is really kind of a straight line boundary selection. Okay? Let me deselect all. Control Shift and A on our keyboard. Okay, the one tool that we also used is this soft selection tool. Okay, it can be really helpful in selecting and manipulating geometry. Okay, disable that and undo. So we have a nice clean start. So let's go in our faces mode. Selection tools are located surprisingly here under selection, and as you can see there are many selection options and functions in selection menu. Okay. What I want you to notice is this little bar right here. If you press the little bar, then this menu will undock and it will be visible all the time. This is a pretty neat function, and it shows how cinema can be customizable in any manner. In fact, let's expand on that. Let's say we want to have this menu always visible or docked somewhere in our layout. So once again we can select this bar and drag it, and you will see a small highlighted preview where the docked bar will be located. So for example, if I release my mouse here, then this whole menu will be docked here. Okay, and you can resize those windows and customize cinema for it in any way you want. Okay, so we briefly touched the layouts and docking and options. We will probably talk about this a bit more later. Okay. One of the most commonly used features in selecting is this guy here, and it's called loop selection. An alternative to this window would be pressing U key on your viewport, and you will get a list of commonly used commands. Okay? Somebody likes it this way, somebody likes it the other way, somebody always use a shortcut. Any way that works for you is just fine. Okay, so let's select our loop selection tool, and what basically this tool does, it selects a loop of polygons. So for example, now we have selected these polygons all the way around. There is a similar tool for that, and you won't be able to see difference in face mode. It feels and looks kind of same. So let's for example cycle with our enter key to the edge mode. So in loop mode, in loop selection mode, you will select edges in this manner, in straight lines. But in rig selection mode or tool, you will select them in this manner. Okay? You can clearly understand the difference. What I also have to mention is that every tool has some options that you can check or uncheck in Attribute Manager, and they could be really helpful. Okay, so we will not talk about them, you will have to explore them by yourself. The next selection tool is an outline selection. Okay, so what basically this does is next, it outlines the currently selected polygons. Okay, the next selection, which can be demonstrated pretty clearly. Let's say for some reason that we unselect all, press our E key to get in our move tool, and if you want to select just upper two rows of these polygons. Okay, sometimes selecting them would be quite easy because on this example it isn't really a big deal. So we will select our loop selection, select first row, second row, then we shift click down the first row, and now maybe we will go to our live selection tool and simply again with the shift key select all those faces. Okay, and this is clumsy. There is a much easier solution for that, and the solution is to deselect all, go in our edge mode, and now if you do a loop selection here, you will define a boundary for selection. So now if you select the fill selection tool, you will select between those two geometries. Between those two, I mean the ones that are divided by this line. Okay, so now you can easily select this upper part of the cube. Okay, let's undo that. Go into our edge mode. You can always see the Cinema 4D remembers what was selected in any of these modes. Okay, you can also select something in between. Okay, you have to have two loops. We can shift click to add another loop, and now if we fill selection, we can select in between or the bottom part or the upper part. You get the picture. It's pretty straightforward. The path selection is somewhat similar to loop and ring selection tools, but it works in the next manner. You can basically hold down your mouse and draw your selection without releasing it, and once you release it, you will have that current path you draw selected. Here under drop down menu you can see there are options, for example, for a simple edge loop. And what simple edge loop means is when you have a break in your geometry, the loop will be defined just the first straight line to the boundary perpendicular line, for example like here. Okay, because if you could select a loop selection here and try to select only this straight edge, it won't work. It will always select the loops of polygons. Okay, now we will skip this Phong break selection because I will explain it later in later lessons. This convert selection, well, it's much easier to, again, you can see that our loop selection is selected. Go back to the move tool with the E key. Anything that you have selected, for example, we have this edge now selected, and this axis is kind of in the way, and you can always hide the axis by pressing Alt and D on your keyboard. To reveal it back, just simply repeat Alt D, Alt D. Okay? Sometimes it helps you to select something, or it can get in a way. It can distract you a bit from working. So anything you select, for example, we now have these edges selected. If we hold down our Control key and click to go in our point mode, then you will see that that selection, that edge selection was converted to point selection. Okay, so for example, let's demonstrate this a bit more. Select our live selection tool, and you can select some faces, anyway, any faces you want. For example, we can hold down Control key and go in our edges mode, and you see that that face selection converted to edge selection. Convert it any way we want. We can even go from converted selection to point mode converted selection. Okay, it really is a lifesaver and helps a lot in the modeling process. Okay, these next tools are pretty self-explanatory. Select all means select all, which you can do by pressing, for example, Ctrl A, or you can deselect all with Ctrl Shift and A. Okay, this invert is really simple. But for example, let's say you want to select all these points except maybe these 4 points. The easy way, the hard way is to select them all and deselect this one. The easy way is to select only those 4 points and just invert the selection. Okay? Always go for the most simplest solutions. The next guy here is also pretty self-explanatory. So let's say I have selected these faces and I press select connected. Watch what happens. So any geometry that is connected to your current selection will be selected also. We can show this a bit more clearly. For example, let's select a loop of polygons here and simply delete them. So now we have a gap between our geometries. If you, for example, go into our move tool, select one of this face and hit select connected command, then only that is connected to that face will be selected. Okay, let me undo that. Here we have a grow and shrink selection. That it cannot be more simpler. Grow selection simply grows selection, shrink selection simply shrinks the selection. Okay. The next set of tools is for hiding components, and you can hide faces. So what I mean, for example, sometimes when you model, you will have to hide something to get a clearer view to a specific part of your model. So simply select the polygons and hit hide selected. Okay, so now these polygons aren't gone, they are still here, but they are hidden, so you can work, for example, on inside part of the cube. Okay. One word of caution: if you go into other modes here, for example in point mode, and click this on hide all, your faces won't show back. You have to be in faces mode to select unhide all, and your faces will show up again. Okay, that's a bit confusing, but that's the way it works. This guy here, hide unselected, is really simple. For example, when you want to hide everything except the thing you selected. Okay, so we hide unselected and only this polygon stays. Okay, we will unhide all. And if you think that's all, it's not. There are many more features. Here is a really powerful tool, and it's called set selection. Let's say you selected, for example, with our live selection tool, these polygons here, and you want to see now for it to remember that selection so it can be easily accessible. So for example, if you are doing a complex model, for example, let's say a human character, then you can create selections of natural parts of body. For example, you can create a selection for a head, for hands, for legs, and so on. So let me show you that. If I now click this set selection, you'll instantly see here a tag forms. So this is a polygon selection. And here, of course, in the attributes manager, you can see some attributes regarding that polygon selection. We'll just name this accordingly. So let's say our cube faces. Okay. So now even if you deselect and start working on your model, and you're modeling, and you want to select these faces again, you can just simply double click here and they will be selected. There is also a small warning here. If you are going to set multiple selections, for example, now beware always to deselect this tag. Okay, why? Because if you now select something else and click set selection, see now 4D will override this selection with your new selection. Okay, so let me undo that. So beware, always click off somewhere here to deselect this tag. Okay, and now when you select some new polygons and hit a set selection command, you will get a new selection tag here. Okay, always name them, and you can, for example, also here do some basic commands with those selections. So for example, hide polygons, and you will hide everything that is related to that polygon selection. This also works with points and edges. So let me just show you. For example, this, I don't know, a few edges here. Okay, and now if you hit set selection, the cinema already will create a new selection without overriding this one. Why? Because the selection is not the same. This represents faces, this represents edges. So for example, we can select some points just to clarify this. Again, set selection, and we'll see a point selection. So beware, if you're making your next selection set that is the same information, so if it is faces or points or edges, in this case, if you're making a point selection, rather click off here and again select it, just not to override these selections. Okay, I hope I didn't lost anyone in this video, and this pretty much covers it for selection tools. They are really helpful.